everyone, and welcome to another Tech1M mentorship session. And today we're going to be talking about presentation skills. How do you make an impact at work with presentation skills? So welcome to everyone that is joining us. Welcome to, all right, I can already feel the love. We're welcoming back Bunmi Martins. She was here with us in December and she really took us to town, told us about how we could get over imposter syndrome. And now she's taking us on a completely different topic. He's taking us on a topic that every single person needs, regardless of where you are. So it means that if you are an entry level, a senior level, an executive level, it is extremely important how you make an impact at work, how you actually do this using presentation skills. Presentation skills is something that we build right from when we were very, very little. From a baby, how you want to be, how you want to present yourself to people. You know, they tell you that you only have just sometimes you can only make a first impression once. So when someone is saying something that you've done or someone is meeting you, how exactly do you want them to feel? How do you want to make those sort of impact? So that's what we're going to be discussing today. For the guys that haven't met Bunmi Martins before, I'm going to be giving her an opportunity to introduce herself again. But for myself, I'm Tommie Edwards, and I'm the CEO here at Tech1M. And what we're doing is Tech1M is an intelligent hiring platform for companies to be able to find talent. We're using our intelligent matching algorithm to match them together with talent for them to be able to find them, to hire them, to pay them, and to manage them globally. In doing this, we've created an edtech platform where talents can also develop and upskill themselves in tech. So today's session, like I mentioned, is all about making an impact at work using presentation skills. So without too much drama, let's introduce Bunmi Martin. So Bunmi, please kindly introduce yourself and we can begin.
So hi everyone. I am Bunmi Martins. I'm glad to be here again. So thank you very much for having me back. Just a bit, just a very brief background about myself. I am a business analyst and have been for quite a number of years now. My area of specialty is within credit risk, regulatory reporting within the financial services, and I've got well over 14 years experience. Very close. It's well over that. Over the years, I've got a lot of experience in that space. Working across and leading different projects in regulatory reporting, credit risk modeling, within tier one investment banks, wholesale banks as well over the years. On a personal level, like I said last time, I love to read, I love to eat, and I love to watch, great series on Netflix. So I know that we're a bit pressed for time, so I won't go too long, but yeah, that's just a bit background on who I am.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for me. So I love, like I mentioned last time, I love what you love. I love to eat, even though sometimes most times you don't even get the time because they're so busy. But then I love the Netflix part when you get a little bit of
I know,
just chill a bit and it just calms your nerves and
I
stuff.
know.
So I'm sure a lot of people here are feeling
A
the
bit of
same.
an escape, isn't it?
I know, you know. So guys, this is where you ask your questions. It is very, very important that, like I said, without presentation skills, without a good way of you presenting yourself, showing who you are, you are a person that is filled with, you are unique in your own rights. You're filled with a lot of, intelligence, a lot of things that you've learned over the years, a lot of things that your parents, your community, your teachers, everybody has impacted you with. But then when it gets to how you present all of those things to people at work, someone that's just met you, how exactly do you do that? So we're going to give Bumi a few minutes to just like give us some tips. And then I'm hoping you guys will start asking your questions. And you have to really think about this because I said presentation skills is something that you're going to use forever. This is not something that you need to just get a job or you need to just do this particular job. It's something you need for the rest of your life because it sets you apart. So I'm going to hand over to Bumi for her to give us in her own experience how basically can you use presentation skills to your advantage? How exactly do you, make an impact using presentation skills?
Okay. Thanks, Tommy. So when we talk about presentation skills, it's quite wide, isn't it? It's very closely related to communication skills, how you communicate, how you pass across your message. A lot of times with the verbal communication, it could be written communication as well. In my line of work, which is a business analyst, it's a very key skill to have to be able to speak to people in a way that they understand, and to leave an impression, that makes you come to mind if ever there's, a need to reach out to an expert in the field for someone to do the job, and etc. So I'll start from verbal communication. The way you present yourself at work. So you've got the job, you've gone through the interview process. Now you're in there, you're in the office. How do you communicate who you are? So you've just met the program lead or the executive director, and they say, "Oh, I haven't met you before. Can you tell me who you are?" You need to have, you know, in the back of your mind what you would say if someone were to ask you that question. How would you present yourself? How would you communicate who you are? Would it make sense, or would you just start rambling, and using filler words, clutch words, when you're asked that question? It's always good in terms of verbal communication, be able to express yourself. Most of the time, you need to anticipate some of these questions. So coming into a project new, you have to be able to introduce yourself in as very little time as possible, using as very little words, but in such a way that the person comes away knowing exactly who you are, why you are there, and what you're doing. And that really helps to build your confidence. Preparing yourself for those types of scenarios, that goes a long way, and that's worked for me over the years. Now I'll come down to nonverbal communication, which is written communication, which we all do a lot of. And when you're in a job, that even goes even way further. So it starts from things like emails. If you are a business analyst, I write a lot of requirements documents. I make a lot of PowerPoint presentations, and I have to walk, senior level executives through those presentations. And one of the things that has worked for me in making sure that it's not a car crash whenever I've had to do any of that is preparing in advance. If I have to make a presentation, a BRD, a PowerPoint, I like to prepare in advance. I like to know exactly what I need to be doing. What do I need to be presenting? What preparing in advance does for me is it gives me enough time to prepare the documentation, think about my points, think about the logic, the sequence, um, put it aside for a few days. Because I find that when you've been in the detail of something for so long, it's very easy to miss key mistakes, key errors, key gaps in sort of the logical sequence of it. And I find that preparing in advance, putting it away for a while, and then coming back to read it before the final sort of presentation or the final forwarding to the relevant, audience, helps me to identify where there's typos that I didn't see before. Sometimes you would read a paragraph that made sense to you 3 days ago, but all of a sudden, you realize, oh, I need a bit more detail there, or I need to take out some of the words. It's a bit of a complex statement, and that really does help to build my confidence, in sending out the final document or walking through the final document. Preparing in advance, I give myself enough time to go through time and again, pick out errors, pick out mistakes. The last thing you want in sending out a document or going through a presentation with a live audience is so many typos. It puts off the person who's reading it. And sometimes when you've sent that document off, you're not actually there, to talk through the document. So the impression that they get from the document is the impression they will have of you. So if they've just read something or they've just gone through something that, every 2 words they just want to write and put it in there, that there's a typo here, there's an error there. It takes away from the experience they have. And sometimes that's the only opportunity you get for some people to interact with you, and they come away thinking, no, I'd really rather not do that again. So, it goes a long way. Know your audience. Obviously, if you're preparing something, if you're presenting an idea, you're presenting an analysis, whatever it is that you are preparing, know your audience. What do I mean by this? Who am I presenting this for? What are they going to do with the information in it? And that will help you to determine what exactly you want to put in it, what exactly you want to write in it, the audience that you're presenting to. Is it on an FYI basis? Do you need some information from them? Because that then helps you to structure your content in such a way that elicits a response from them. Is it just to highlight some issues? Is it to highlight solutions? You need to know your audience and why you are presenting your ideas to them in whatever shape or form that you are presenting it. And that will help you to sort of structure your document or your presentation in a way that makes sense to the people who will be receiving it. When you are putting together the document as well, one thing I like to look through for, which sort of ties back to my preparing in advance, is using repetitive words. When we speak, we tend to use a lot of words that, sort of mean the same thing as the last thing we said. We're trying to fill up the document. We're trying to use filler words in there. Try to avoid that. I've tried to do it. It's not the easiest thing to do, but going through your document with a fine-tooth comb will help you to identify where you've made a sentence unnecessarily complex. It's made it a little bit understandable, a little bit not understandable, if I can use that word, because you've just tried to pack in so much into that one little sentence. When one sentence will do, why use three? Also, use pictorial presentation. You could use workflows. You could use diagrams. You could use, sort of a snapshot of something that visually represents the message or the details or the information that you're trying to pass across to your audience. That engages the user a bit more. Use scenario-based approach for some of the content you want to pass across. That helps the audience to identify with what you're trying to tell them, a little bit more. Another thing is, before you actually start to prepare your documentation or your presentation, try to list your ideas in a logical sequence. So, you've sat down, you've identified what you need to pass across, you know your audience, you know exactly how you want to pass across this information to your audience, you know exactly what you need from them. The next thing you want to do is to make sure that as you're starting in a logical sequence. If one part of your document is going to be referring to another, you need to make sure that they sit in such a way that when the user is reading through, or when you're going through it in a live session, it makes sense to the person reading or to the person listening to you. That is very, very key. In sort of putting your information forward in front of people. What else? I think another thing is to anticipate questions, the type of questions that might come up based on the information you're given. And what I've done over the years, when I anticipate questions, is either I put in detail that would potentially answer that question in my documentation, or if I'm going through a presentation, I might just create a slide that gives more information on that particular question that I anticipate might happen, or at least have my answers ready if anyone were to ask me the question. So, getting my answers ready would work best if I'm, going to be presenting in a live session, walking stakeholders through or walking an audience through what I've put together. So I anticipate the questions. I leave enough time in my presentation as well to make sure that people actually get the chance to ask the questions. I have my answers ready to a high degree or to a high level, and then we can delve down into details in the session. If you're presenting live, you want to consider working on anxiety and nerves. It's one thing, I know when I first started working, and definitely in certain projects that I've worked on where I've had to sort of present to really high level executives, I've sort of thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get through this? They're going to tear me apart. I'm not going to survive this experience. And what I've tried to do before those sessions is when I'm presenting my document, like I said, I've already identified my audience and I've put together information that is relevant to them. I'm not boring them with unnecessary details. And as well, I try to practice my presentation. So if I've put together a slide, I try to go through my slide. I try to sort of practice it out loud. I try to memorize as much of the content as possible so that I'm not referring to the document every 2 seconds simply because I can't remember what I've written down. That slows down, your walkthrough. That slows down and takes away the experience of the people listening to you if you have to pause every moment to read through what you're talking about. So preparing, practicing, building your confidence. Will that get rid of anxiety or nerves? No. You will go in and do it anyway. But what it does is it helps you to at least get in there and start to deliver. Yeah. So I know I've given sort of a a
I know.
long-winded answer to that, but yeah.
But that's good, 'cause that starts to get us really thinking. You've said quite a lot of things that is now, making many people start to really start to think about this as it goes. So, from what you're saying, when it comes to presentation, we need to really be thinking about two aspects. There is the verbal presentation, which is the one that this is a part of verbal communication right now because we are presenting ourselves in a sort of way. We are talking, we have an audience, and they are
Yeah.
listening. So this is verbal communication. And then we have the non-verbal, which is writing. And when we talk about writing, right now, that has now gone into multiple areas as well, because it could be you are typing a text, you are putting something on social media, how do you want to present it? You are actually typing an email, which takes it back to work because most of the time at work, emails are going to be where you're going to type. But sometimes, people have teams, you have things that you still have to type, your messages and your chats within your messages. So the way you present yourself there also matters. And then you have like documentation that you have to present a documentation. So you've prepared a documentation, you prepare the document, you already know your skills, you already know what needs to be in the document. Typically, most documents will have a flow that you've been taught while you were learning how to prepare the document. But then how do you then present it? So in presenting that document, even though the documentation was written in a non-verbal way, you now need to present it in a verbal way so that your audience can actually now really understand what you're trying to pass across. But then in all of these things, I don't know if you guys picked all these things up because what Bumi was saying there is that when you're typing an email, let's use that because this is one that you know that sometimes that you just want to pull your hair out when you see some sort of emails. And you're like, seriously, do you really think I have the time to read all of these things? There's just some basic rules that people need to know. And if you don't know that, maybe this is a very good session that you need to use in knowing that. Like the title of your email, your title of your email is so important because that will make me understand if I need to open this or not. Do you understand? Because there are just so many people, especially if you are dealing with like a senior exec that has so many people fighting for their attention, and you want something. It's not somebody that they only get 2 emails in their inbox, so they are very happy to receive your email. But when you have someone that has like 50 emails in a day, 100 emails a day, and you want to get, you have to be the title of your email is super important. You have to be as tight as possible on that title. You have to go straight to the point. This is what this is about. And then the person really understands that, oh, okay, all right. If it's a reply to something, and even if you don't want to share the thread, make sure you are doing, it's a whatever of what is happening. Person understands that this is a threat to an information they are already aware of, even if you didn't copy the other guys into it. Um, and I think from some of the things Bumi said that I also picked up that you could apply to emails is that she's saying something about, knowing the audience is like key. I used to use this analogy when back in the days when I was still in corporate though, just different. Back in the days when I'm going for an interview and they'll ask me, how do you handle stakeholders? How do you communicate with stakeholder? Do you
Difficult
know
stakeholders. Yeah, that
what?
question. Yeah,
I formed my own analogy, and I use this analogy in every single interview. This is my analogy.
absolutely.
I'll say, you familiar with prawn cocktails, right? They'll say, "Oh yeah, prawn cocktails. I really like it." Da, 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 da." Okay, so this is it. That there are different types of stakeholders. There's some stakeholders that, as far as they're concerned, they want to understand, where did you get the prawns from? What type of prawns is this? How did you make the sauce? What went into the sauce? What type of lettuce is in here? And what sort of how is the presentation going to be? Is it going to be served in a tall glass? Is it going to be served in a bowl? And so they want to know the details, the full details of everything. Those sort of people are people that we do day to day. That are people that they need to know the fine details, because the details matters to what they do next.
Mm,
Then there are some other type of people, and they just want to say, they just say, okay, prawn cocktails. All right, lovely. How does it taste? Does it look good? All right, good. Cheers. And as far as they are concerned, they are very high level. They put their trust in you, knowing that you and some other people will know the details. What they just want to see is, what does it look like, and what are they, they're just looking for the time bombs
mm,
around it. Does it follow our normal presentation style? It does. Is it a prawn cocktail? It is. Does it taste good? It does. Check. So if you guys get what I'm saying, and then we can keep going in detail. Some people will want to know the sea that the prawns was caught from. Some people so depending on the type of stakeholder that you're dealing with, it depends on, that starts to determine the level of detail you give out. Some
mm.
people don't have time to be listening to how this and that and that and that happens. So you need to know that, but then you then need to know how to present that, in the
Yeah.
sense that you, your email or your whatever thing you are presenting to that person, as succinct as possible. Another very, very good example is founders. And I'm sure you guys have heard about the elevator pitch. So the elevator pitch is like, from I'm on the ground floor, we're going to the second or third floor, and I'm stuck in an elevator with someone that could actually really change the course of my business. And I only have 30 seconds to tell them what I'm doing. What would you do? I'm doing so many things, but how do I say it? So you need to narrow that down. You just go bang. We're developing a hiring platform for companies to be able to find, source, manage, and pay talent. That is it. Then the person's like, all right, they've said something there that makes them feel like, I want to talk to you again. All these things are still, we're saying the same thing. It's still presentation skills.
Mm,
How are you presenting the same information? Because every time we're talking about presentation skills, we're talking about a whole lot of information. We're trying to find the best way to present that information in a way that makes sense to the other person. They understand it, and they can give us the appropriate answer that we're looking for. That's the point.
mm.
So avoid the jargons, like when we mentioned, relevant information to the relevant audience. She said you have to understand the level of detail you are giving to the audience, depending on the type of audience it is. And then you need to be able to prepare, practice, especially when you're giving live presentation like the ones we're doing right now. So you need to be able to prepare, practice. If you're facilitating a workshop, you're facilitating a meeting, and you have other people in there, you just don't go in there and and you're like 20 minutes late, and you're expecting people to wait for you, or all of those sort of things. There's some general etiquette that you just need to know around communication. Another thing I learned is, I don't even know who told me this, and this happens in text a lot. Oh God, this thing drives me nuts. People want to write. Though you know how the Gen Z writes today. What's it called? Everything is abbreviations. When you're talking to a Gen Z that is like you, be using the abbreviations. But when you're talking to people that would not get it, you get, like you'll say,
Mm.
oh, they just say YOLO. I'm like, okay, well, sorry, you know, you only live once. I'm like, okay, how am I supposed to know that this is so? People type, some people cannot even type and anymore. AND. They'll use N. Have you seen that one? You type that in an email to me, you're fired. Because you can't type. So we
Yeah,
are
I love those abbreviations.
Do you know what I'm saying? You need to be able to separate it. What am I talking to? If this is a, is this an
Mm,
official, this is a, so you remove all those jargons, please. When you're typing an email, remove the jargon. When you're in the text message and you're doing your office text and things, of course you can use that, but you have to also know who you're using it for. Of course, if you are using it, if you are chatting
mm.
on a friendly level and you do that, I'm like, okay, this person is just making it, But then this is, when it's something serious, you have to understand that it's something serious. So all of that is,
Can I?
yeah, please, button.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, because you talked about texting and, sort of sending messages at work, and in informal settings as well. Definitely know your audience. If it's official, please take out the jargons. Another thing that I would say that I've lived by over the years is when you are chatting at work, even if it's with your work friend and it's informal, mind your language. Even though this person is your bestie, you go to lunch together and you're absolutely just talking about, not even about work, it could be about something else. Do not be tempted to put things into that communication, especially if it's over an official channel, like an office phone or on an office email. Do not be tempted to put in things that you would be embarrassed if a third party were to read through. Try to avoid that. I've seen scenarios where people have written things, in an informal setting, but using official channels, and somehow those messages have come out, to a third party view. It was, in one situation, they were sharing their screen in a very important meeting, and their friend had responded to their message, and everyone on the call could
Ooh, just
see
got it.
everything that had been
Maybe just,
typed. They could see that summary, that
yeah,
appears when you get the notification, and even that was embarrassing enough, for the person in question. So it's just, even though it's informal, if you're using an official channel for your communication, please, um, you know, be mindful of the type of language you use and the type of things you talk about. If a third party were to read what I'm writing right now to my friend, would I be embarrassed or would it be fine? And, I just say it's really none of your business to be reading that. Please, can you not read that? So I just wanted to, also just put that out there.
that is, yeah, as in that's 100% golden, because and you would even see it, like, even in, if we take it out of work for a second and even go into politics, there are things that
Mm,
people type on Twitter, even that is a public place, and then
exactly.
it comes back to haunt you 20 years
Mm,
after.
very
So
true.
yeah, especially when you have to be careful, because the person you are presenting is you.
Mm,
Everything you type, nobody understands the context as at the time
a
you're
reflection of
typing.
you. Yeah.
The reflection of it is you. So you have to, and then there's something that is in background checks. Some companies go as far as social media check. It's a form of background check. They go into your social media and say, this person that we are hiring, are they someone that is very controversial? Is it going to cause us any drama in the future? Do we want to be associated with somebody like this?
Mm,
So you don't go on to, so they check, and
absolutely.
there are companies that are built for that, that do those sort of checks. So not only at work, even outside of work, what do I, when someone says Tommie Edwards, what do I want them to see? It's extremely important. Think about that. Once, if you think about that, it will matter on how you type outside, how you type with your colleague, how you present yourself, and how you want people to perceive you. You get so
Mm,
have a lot of so I know that we are going in and out, we're going verbal, non-verbal, but I'm hoping you guys are picking the key points that you need to pick in there. You don't go into an email or a text message and type in all caps. I hope you know what that means. You are shouting at the person, screaming. So if you don't know, if you think, oh, it's just caps is just caplet. There are just some etiquettes that that you have to follow. You go into a meeting, and this is like I know right now is more, this one is kind of like on the fence. You go, well, this is what I am hearing now, that if I go into a meeting, or let's say we are here together, and Bunmi decides to switch on our video and I don't, it means I don't regard her as much. That
mm.
I don't know about that, but that is, so just think about it. Think about it. Think
I've been
about
guilty of that actually.
Yeah, I have too. I have too. So,
I have
but
been guilty of that.
but then I've been told of, in a few times that can you know all those Zoom things, and
Yeah.
then the moderator just send you, can you please switch on your video? I'm like, oops, and then you
Mm,
start to try to
absolutely.
like, okay, let's quickly turn it on. So all of this manner of communication, it's important. It's important. You have to learn it. So yeah, brilliant. Anita, I'm glad you knew that caps means shouting. It means you're yelling at the person. So let's take some questions that we have. Um, so this is from Jarvis. It says pre-presentation anxiety. What are the tips you've gathered over the years to overcome this?
Um, is that for me? So I think I mentioned this when I was speaking as well. So if I have to do a presentation, practice, practice, practice. I try to memorize what I'm presenting. So I mean, first of all, like it sort of encompasses everything. Before the day of the presentation, I've put together my material. I've made sure that my material is fit for purpose. Why am I having that session? Is it to, sort of extract information, to give information, to solutionize, whatever it is? I make sure that the material that I'm using for that presentation is fit for purpose. I know the audience, so I've established the level of detail that I'm going to go into with them, so I don't bore them. And then I practice. Like I said, this never takes away my nervousness or anxiety going into the presentation. But what it ensures is that at least I have an idea of what I'm talking about because I've practiced it. I'm not having to read through a document like a robot. They're not there to watch you read through a document. They're there to listen to you speak. The document is only there as a visual aid, to back up what you will be saying, hopefully. So you want to make sure that you know as much of your presentation off the top of your head as possible, so that the flow is not hampered when you're doing that. At least when you've got that in the presentation itself, the vibe you get from the audience continues to boost your confidence. As you go, you'll find out that you start the session a bit nervous, but with the right documentation, with the right sort of logic to what you are giving to them, the response you get will also make you feel more comfortable. When you're walking through and they're saying to you, yes, absolutely, I agree with you. I understand that. What answer do you need from me? How can I help you? It shows that you're communicating and you find you get more comfortable. If there's a way to eradicate anxiety or nervousness before a presentation, I'd really love to know. Um, I haven't been able to do away with it 100%, but those are the tips that help me if I'm prepared going in. It really does help me to at least get started and get going.
Yeah, and I will agree with that. And I also say that the saying "practice makes perfect" comes in, and that will really really help you
Mm,
in your anxiety. So, like when we mentioned, a lot of times you see people create presentation slides and they're just reading off it. It doesn't show confidence. It doesn't show that you really know what you're talking about, even if you've written so much words. In your presentation, when you are presenting, you want to have more pictorial, more graphs, more this and that, like we mentioned earlier, and just have less of words so that people are connected to you and not just to what is there. What you are showing on the screen is just to back up what you're saying, and those things help just keep their eyes on it. So not too many words on your presentation slide, but you yourself know your presentation slide. Go through it several times, go through it with yourself, record yourself and watch it back, and like, okay, am I ready? Okay, I'm using a lot of here. Can I try and reduce that a little bit? Or this area, I'm not really sure what I'm doing in this area. Let me prepare. This is the area that is I'm getting stuck. Let me know exactly what I'm going to say in this area. And if you prepare, you'll be shocked. Everybody prepares. Tim Cook wouldn't come
mm,
on to an Apple live launch and just start and just freestyle. It's not happening. He has prepared.
mm,
That is why it looks like flawless every time you watch it. The preparation that goes into it, I can only imagine. So you don't come in and not prepare. So if you prepare a whole lot, it will tone down the anxiety. Doesn't mean it's still not going to be there. But now at least you have, you can imagine everybody has anxiety. You already have anxiety and you now don't know what you're saying. You're reading off something. Do you know how bad that is? That's bad. But you know what you're saying, but there's just these nerves. As you come in and people already feel like some people will start to nod. You are like, okay, it looks like I'm getting this. And then
Mm.
before you know what's happening, the
Getting the
confidence
message
is packing up.
across. Yeah.
Exactly. But practice. The more times you practice, the less anxiety you're going to get, and the more confident you'll be when it's time for showtime. Yeah. Okay. So we've got another
Absolutely.
question. So I'll let you take this one too, Bunmi. How do you handle an audience that don't seem to connect to your presentation, especially when you bring in so much energy? Hmm.
So there can be different sides to that. Um, the angle that I will start from is: are you sure you have the right audience for the material you're presenting? I found in my line of work, there are times when I've had meetings with different types of people or different types of stakeholders, as it were, in the same meeting because it's unavoidable. Maybe working groups or stakeholders. Some people really honestly don't care about what you're talking about because it doesn't impact their day. You find the people who engage with you the most are the people for whom that information is most relevant. If you've gone into a presentation with an audience,
Hmm.
let's assume, going back to some of the examples that Tommie gave, you're presenting to senior executives who really just want to know, where has this come from? How does it taste? Good, I'm done. But then you start to go into the details of, it was farmed here on the 15th of March. And then you start to go into the boring, excruciating details. They honestly are only just being polite and not able to tell you, sorry, can I dial off this call, or can I excuse myself? Because at the moment you are presenting to them information that is not relevant to them or that they're not interested in. So you need to be sure that the material you brought to your presentation is relevant for your audience and at the right level of detail. Another thing is, how have you structured your presentation? It needs to make logical sense. So, like, we've just mentioned, you've come into a presentation, but you're just reading through. And not only are you just reading through, the sequence of the ideas you're putting forth, the logic is a bit all over the place. You can lose people in there as well, where they switch off. If there's too many words in there, if you've packed in so much into the presentation, you're trying to say so much. Some people just lose interest, even though the information is relevant to them. What you might find is, at the end of the day, some might come back to you and say, "Can you clarify what you were talking about here? Because I really didn't get you." So I think for me, because an audience not engaging can be hinged on many factors, and those are just two that I've sort of identified over the years. And I know, Tommy, I know you do so many loads of presentations, on a day-to-day basis. So there might be more in there, but from me, are you sure you've got the right audience? Are you sure you've got the right material at the right level? And are you sure you're presenting your ideas or your information in a way that's interesting to the users and doesn't just, tune them out as you're going through?
Definitely. I think all the things you've said are like the very first things I would say as well, in terms of, because most of the time it's actually not the audience, it's actually you, because they
Mm,
are all you want the audience to do is attend this meeting. Do you know, time is not one of the most valuable things, actually the most valuable resource. Time is money, time is everything. So for somebody to give you their time, and then you are presenting, they're spending energy, they're spending time to sit down and listen to you. And whatever, if they're not connecting, then it's actually on you, because they have done their bits, they have to be
mm,
there. So, and like Bumi said, they're not connecting probably because it's the wrong audience. You have called people that don't need to be there. The person only wants to know about is does it taste good? But then you called, you've mixed them together. You don't mix your audience. You don't mix the person that only wants the high level with the person that wants the detailed level. You will not get an engaged audience. Some people will probably walk out at some point because it's just too much. Do you understand? So you have to understand the audience, and that is why um, when it comes to what's it called, facilitating, you and having workshop sessions and all of those sort of things, you group your audience into multiple different meetings, and so you have different sessions for the different type of people. It's extremely important. Without that, you won't get an engaged audience. But then it goes beyond that. In the beginning, when you are doing your presentation, you need to find a hook. What am I going to say to these people in the beginning that makes them even want to pay attention? Sometimes the hook is that all of you have the same goal. You're working for the same
Mm,
company, you're on the same team, all of you already know this deadline, and you're coming. We are 20 days towards to production, and we think we're going to hit it. Let me tell you how. Ba, 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 and you start to talk. Everybody's they're going to be engaged. What is that hook to your presentation? Try to find the hook. That's one of, and then there's sometimes that, which I have experienced, the audience just don't want to give it away. They're enjoying what you're saying, especially when they are very senior level audience or something that they have to criticize and give you feedback. They are trying to even make it more difficult for you by saying, I'm just going to be blah, even though I like what she's saying here, but I'm going to tell her at the end, let me see if she can control herself to the end. So if you are
mm,
sometimes you are going by the audience vibe and you are allowing that to just only feed your energy, you might be doing the right,
mm,
but then they are not nodding. They're just they're just sitting down there and listening to you and looking at. Although if you have an audience like someone like me, I'll give it away. There's no way I'm not going to know if I'm enjoying something. But then just some very 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 good people. They are very very good critics. That is their job. And if those are the type of
mm,
audience you have, then they're not going to give it away. You just have to be confident in yourself that you've prepared, you've practiced, you have the right audience, you chose the right venue, the room is not too hot, it's not too cold. Yeah, if it's a virtual thing, you are not going to use a 40 minutes free Zoom for a 1 hour meeting. There are just some basic things that you need to know that I've ticked all of this. I've sent out my agenda ahead of time. They know what everybody that is in here knows what we're going to be talking about. And then I am saying the right thing. And I'm not
mm,
reading just off the screen. So leave the audience, if you've done all of those things, leave the audience to be the audience. At the end of it, you then figure out if they got you or not. But just the reason why for this latter one, don't take this latter one as your first one. You have to think about that. All the things we said in the beginning has to be checked first before, because otherwise when you get to that end, it should just be, please can you not invite me to the type of meeting next time? Blah 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 blah. Blah. Fine.
yeah.
So I hope that answered your question, Ayodeji. So we've got another one here. Is it professional? And this is from a while. Is it professional to entertain questions during presentation session, or is it best to communicate to your audience questions will only be entertained after the presentation? I didn't think I read that well.
Um,
You got the question.
so I think it's, is it right to take questions in the middle of your presentation, or must you wait till the end? When you've talked through all your slides and then you get to the last slide that says, any questions? That can work sometimes. But I find, and this is a matter of preference, a matter of context, environment, the people that you're presenting to. But what I find works for me, if I'm going through a session, is I try to break it up into chunks, not too long, not too short. So if I'm talking about a particular concept, so I'm walking through a particular concept, I try to, at the end of what I've just said, say, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any concerns? And then we're able to deal with it, in that box. You find that sometimes the questions that they ask might lead into the next part of your presentation. Now, I understand that that won't always happen. That might not always happen depending on the size of the audience. Sometimes, you might say everyone should send in their questions, and everything will be dealt with at the end of the session. Like I said, I don't think it's unprofessional to take questions during the presentation. Sometimes that is what is required. If you're presenting in a workplace, you're presenting an idea to executives or stakeholders in a workplace. Best believe they're not waiting till the end of the session. They're going to be asking. Sometimes they will cut you off mid sentence to say, "Hang on a minute, can we dial back to what you've just said and explain
Go
that a
back
bit?"
to slides.
Yeah, go back up. I have a question on that. So that will happen. They're not even going to ask for your permission to do that. So there are some settings where, and this is in professional settings, mind you. So this is at work, in business meetings, you will have that, and there's nothing unprofessional about that. Sometimes you deal with it right there and then. If you've got an answer to that question, somewhere down the line, you could say, I've got that, and I will go into a bit more detail, in a couple of slides from now, if you don't mind, if that's something, that's relevant to your context at the time. So yeah, it really depends on the audience that you're speaking with, and the situation around it. But it's not unprofessional to take questions during your presentation. Neither is
Yeah.
it unprofessional to only take it after. Depends on the situation.
Absolutely. And I would say the same thing. Depends on the situation. If it's a very short presentation, 5 minutes, then of course questions can wait after. But if it's a
Mm,
long presentation, then be prepared that even if you have the plan that you want to ask all of them at the end, they're always going to stop you in the middle, because sometimes people cannot assimilate every single thing that you're saying for an entire hour or an entire 30 minutes. They want to be able to say, okay, on this section, this is where I have my question. So it's always nice at this. I follow what Bumi has said in there. If I know that my presentation is going to be more than 10 minutes, then I will make sure that even I think 5 minutes. If it's doing 10 minutes, I'll break it into two. I'll want to say, okay, especially if it has multiple parts. So I've completed this area. Any questions? Or we complete 2 or 3 areas, and then you're like, okay, any questions on what we've spoken up so far before we go into the more. So it's just, yeah, it just really depends, but you have to know. But the rule of thumb is very, very long presentations, you don't wait to the end. But when it's short, determine when you need to wait to the end or not.
yeah. Read the room.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we have just 8 minutes to the end, and I think we still have about 3 or 4 questions. So this is from Anthony. It says, have you ever encountered a situation where your presentation was not accepted or approved and you did your best? If you have, how did you resolve it? Hmm. So I think this is talking about a presentation is probably done and is putting all his best into it, but for one reason or the other, it wasn't approved on the spot. So it's like, yeah, this is normal. What happened?
Ask for feedback from the person. It's not approved or accepted because it's not fit for purpose for the person who you require that acceptance or approval from. Doesn't meet their expectations. And the only way, like you said, you've put in your best, you've done your work, you've understood the assignment. Let's hope. If you
Hmm.
understood the assignment, then it should be accepted. But sometimes there might be gaps in understanding, in communication. It's a real thing that can happen, to the best of us. It would be to ask that person for feedback. Why, what do I need to fix? That's honestly the best way for you to go about it. It's not the time to get defensive or feel, like it's a personal slight. It usually isn't, although in some situations, very rarely or very, very special situations, you might want to look into that a bit more in terms of why have they done that. But in usual scenarios where what you've presented has been rejected, it's because it's not fit for purpose for whatever reason it is to the person that you require that acceptance or approval from. So you need to sit with them if you can and understand what the gaps in understanding are. What do you need to do to meet their expectations? Is there is there missing information? Is there too much information? It's just understanding that, and then rectifying it. At the end of the day, they get to say, "This is good enough for me." So that's in the line of work that I do. It's actually a very regular occurrence. With any specification, with anything you're looking to build, you need approval or sign off from at multiple levels. And there will be times when your document gets to a certain person and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't approve that." What would usually follow for me is to sit with the person and understand what their concerns are, why they're not able to put their name or signature to it to say they're fine with it, understand what the problems are, what the concerns are, what the issues might be, and then I will rectify that and represent it for their approval.
That's it. There's no addition to that answer. That's the answer to it. It's just if you haven't done the right thing, then your work is going to be rejected. That's the fact, because no one signs their name on something because you've just roped me in with you to say that this is the
Mm,
level of quality. That's that. So I don't want to be roped in with you if the level of quality doesn't meet my standard. So the ideal thing to do is to throw it back. And if I throw it back, your next question should be why? What exactly do I need to do better? And sometimes this is in my own line of work. I reject things every day and I
mm,
approve things every day. And sometimes it's just a very, very fine thing, just tiny thing that has made this thing rejected. And on my own, what I need to do is, okay, you didn't, can you have this? Can you have that? No, 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 no. I think you're missing the point in here. Take this away and think about this, bring this back, and then but now that you've already started something. So you're not in the beginning. You've already moved forward, isn't it? So now you've missed some bits or you didn't do some bits well. You've gotten feedback on those bits. What you now want to do is that you make sure you listen to those feedback. Like Bunmi said, it's not the time to be defensive. Of course, there'll be times that the person asks, okay, why exactly have you done it this way? You're able to show this is why you've done this in this sort of way.
mm,
And you have to say, okay, I see your point. However, it still doesn't meet what the requirement was in the first place, what the assignment is. So can you go back, redo it? But make sure by the time you are bringing it back this time around, that is when it's now going to be bad. You're bringing it back the time around and you still have gotten everything wrong. Then the person is now investing too much time.
mm.
First time, everyone has their things rejected. Everybody has had their things rejected before. It's not new. That's part of learning. But then when it gets rejected, did you take the feedback? Did you apply that feedback into the thing that you've presented so that by the time you're presenting it again, it has a very, very high chance of getting approved. And if it doesn't, maybe it's just a tiny thing, but not as many as it was before. Do you
Mm.
understand? So another question here. Is there any, so this is from additional, is there any easiest format or template to write a presentation that will make sense to the audience in any industry we find ourselves? Should I answer this one?
Yeah, I'll just say that there's no generic template that I know of. But what I do know is that in whatever that you're trying to present, there's always a template somewhere. If you're working in an office, there will be so many. In fact, you'll be required to use certain formats that meet the company standards. You can't just go off and pick something off Google. But yeah, a little bit of research, you will find something that fits within, especially what you want to do specifically that someone has done. It might not be exactly the same, but it will definitely set you off on the right path.
Yeah. So, like Bumi mentioned, there is no one size fits all. But for the thing that you want to do, so let's say you're preparing a go to market strategy, find go to market strategy templates out there and follow the process you get. And there'll be multiple, and all of them might not even be the same. But then you
Mm.
find that and look at what you're trying to do. Are you trying to create a requirement document? What is the standard for requirement document? Look at what is out there. So because if the question a general easiest template for anything is not possible, because all what you're going to see is just the aesthetics, how beautiful it is, but then it goes beyond beauty of your presentation. The context of it will matter. So it depends on the context of what you're doing. And that is when you then follow the appropriate, how would I call it, table of contents in that sort of way. to make sure that in the things you are doing, you are not presenting number four before number three. You get, all of that. You just need to know that. So for like when we mentioned, in most organizations, especially established organizations, they will typically have templates. But if you're working for many startups and things like that, they're still trying to get all of these things together. So all you would need to do is to go out there and be able to type in what you're trying to understand, find what is there, look at this, come up with a possible template, liaise with the person that has given you this or your colleague to say, what do you think? I think this is the format I'm going to do in writing this. Okay, fine. Then you can now use that. And if that is approved, save it for next time,
Mm.
so that
Yeah.
when you have to do that again, you are not starting from scratch. Then you are going
Mm.
back to that to be able to use that one more time.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. And then the last question of the day, as we have hit 2 o'clock, is this: for individuals that aren't good with aesthetics or design, how do we overcome the is this design slash presentation style fine enough hurdle?
I think for me, that just ties back to the question we've just answered.
Yeah.
Templates, find templates. There's always a template, and you will find, like Tommy said, so many on the particular subject matter that you're interested in. You'll find so many templates. If there isn't a standard one within the organization that you need to use, you will find a lot of templates that you can work with online. That sort of addresses your need. And for me, when I haven't got a clue how to put together certain ideas, I try to look if someone's done something similar before, and if it appeals to me, and I think it will fit in with the audience I'm trying to present to, with the ideas I'm trying to put forward. Um, and yeah, and then I take it from there. So just find templates. There's so many. There's always so many.
Yeah, and that is the power of research. When you're doing something you haven't actually done before, because if you've done it before, you will know how to present it. But then, if you are when it then comes to design and all of that, most organizations they already have their brand guidelines, and you already know what if your organization's brand guidelines has primary colors, secondary colors, you don't just go off and just pick your own color and just start to use it. Won't be accepted, even if they can't see beyond that. Because when you
Mm.
just show that thing, even if all the information is good, they're like, what company are you showing this for? So that's number one rule. Ask for your brand guidelines. Figure out if there is already a template within the organization for presentation that you can then build upon to be able to do what you are trying to do. Most organizations have presentation templates so that everything they present has a similar feel. And if they don't, ask for their brand guidelines so that you're using their primary colors, you're using the exact X color or the RGB color, so you're not going to find.
Fun.
No, there are so many blues. There's a blue, and you just gonna find blue. Oh my god, there are like 1,000 blues. So you have to find the exact one. You want to
I
say
remember.
something?
I remember. I just wanted to say. I remember I've put together a presentation at one time, and for some reason, I couldn't quite get the shade to work on my local laptop. So the shade of the color came out. It was the same color, but slightly different. And one of my stakeholders actually picked up on it and said, "That's not the RBS blue. Can
Can
you
you get right? It's
can you
just
please find?" So yeah, it's very important. Like Toby said, um, if there's a template within and a guideline within your organization, that's the
there
very
will
first
always
place to
be.
start.
There will always
Yeah,
be. Every
yeah.
company, when you create your logo, the next thing you do is your brand guidelines.
Mm,
So there is a brand guideline somewhere. In fact, the fact that you're asking, it shows that you know what you're doing. So ask for the brand guidelines, open it. I think you understand what a brand guideline looks like. It tells you the font of the company you need to use, the primary colors, the secondary colors, and all of those sort of things. Then that's like the minimal you have to first of all follow within your presentation, and that first of all brings the design that you're talking about up, because now you are following their guidelines. Now the
yeah,
rest is now putting in the right information. Is there a presentation template that they are using out there that you can take and now put the right context into it, and you'll be fine. You are not hired to be a designer, so you're hired to present, but then you have to present in the right way, and that's the point. Yeah. So, guys, today this has come to the end of our session today. And before I even say anything, I think we need to shower Bumi with so much love and emoji because she has given us, another beautiful hour. And I've gained so much from this conversation. I hope you guys have as well. And we have a review link that Ayoteji has pinned to this chat. So please, please, please give us your reviews so that we know how you guys are enjoying this. And we are going to be having more and more sessions throughout the month of January and even into February for people that want to come back and listen. So guys, I had a nice time. Thank you, Bumi, for being here.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
having
for
me again.
thank you, and we want to say Happy New Year to you because this is our first
Yeah,
new.
absolutely. Absolutely. Happy New Year to you as well. Happy New Year to everyone on this call.
Yeah, so we just hope that this is going to be a progressive year for you and for everybody on the call. So until we have another session, I think that is on Monday. At least I get to have Sunday rest because I did one yesterday. You won't believe. So until we have another session on Monday, I believe it's 1 o'clock GMT on Monday, where we are going to be talking about, if I can remember, something about hiring. So you need to be there to be able to listen to that as well. All right, guys. So enjoy your weekend. Have a lovely time. Take everything that you've listened, take everything in the recordings of the last ones. If you have the link to the sessions, you can always go back and see those sessions so you can watch the recordings if you've missed any, as we've had quite a few. And until then, I will see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.